Welcome to the Macke Makerspace. Hi, and welcome to the Macke Makerspace. I'm Brother Bob Macke, the curator of meteorites at the Vatican Observatory. And we have been working on this project that I call the Observatory on a Church. We're building a model of the Church of St. Ignatius of Loyola in Rome, where in the mid-19th century, Father Angelo Secchi built an astronomical observatory on the roof. So we've done most of the structure. What's left is we have to paint it and finish it and get it ready for display. So let's get started. Before we can start painting, we have to remove all the parts that will be painted separately. Since I haven't glued any of them down, this is easy and fast work. Since the foam inside the poster board will react to putty and paint, I have to seal all the edges with Mod Podge to protect them. Now for a bit of putty to fill in the gaps and smooth out the seams. I'm also applying some putty to the observatory tower. I printed it in two parts and there's an obvious seam at the join. There are also some sloppy print lines showing that I want to cover up. And no putty job is complete without a ridiculous amount of sanding. The facade won't get the full putty treatment, but I hoped a bit of Mod Podge would fill in some of the small printing gaps. Didn't really work, but that's okay. The first painting step is to spray everything. My tiny makerspace doesn't have the ventilation for spray paint, so I have to go outside. It's a nice sunny day and the view is great from the terrace. I'll start with a coat of gray primer. This will give everything a common base color so the different colors of the underlying materials don't show through in the final paint job. Oh my goodness, take a look at the time. It's almost time for coffee. After coffee, the primer coat is good and dry. The facade of the church is made from travertine that's almost white in color. So I'm going to mask off the steps and spray the rest with white. Wow, time sure flies. It's almost lunchtime. After lunch is back to the workbench. One of the distinguishing features of the travertine on the facade is the dark lines running horizontally across the structure. I'm going to simulate that with some gray paint applied with a stiff bristled splayed brush. It takes just a light touch to do the job. And it's always best to apply more than one color or tone, so I'm following the light gray with a darker one. After centuries exposed to the elements, the church has acquired layers of dirty grime, especially in the recesses. A dark wash will simulate this and will also help accentuate the details. I'll follow that with a white dry brush to pull out the high points. Now for the steps. I'll start with a layer of black. The steps are made from tufa rock with an uneven texture, kind of like concrete. I'll simulate this by sponging on different shades of gray. When I took a closer look at the travertine, I realized that it is slightly yellow-brown. I'm going to try to correct the color with a watered-down wash. Color matching is one area I'm not great at. Throughout the paint job, my goal was not so much to match the exact color as it was to provide the proper sense of the color. Speaking of matching colors, I also realized that the steps are a much lighter shade than what I painted, so now I'll lighten them up a bit. The tiles get a base coat of amaranth red mixed with a bit of orange. I wasn't really happy with that, and I found that a thin layer of brown brings them closer to the actual tile color. And of course, it's got to get dirty. Let's add a dark wash. Speaking of dirt, pigment powder does a great job of simulating the natural layers of dirt and dust that accumulate on the surfaces. Rome is regularly hit with sirocco winds from Africa that carry Saharan dust, and this model has to show it. I'm applying black now. Off camera, I'll add some brown, especially to the tiles. The church needs doors, and doors need paint. The big central door is going to be open, so I also have to paint a tiny bit of the interior entryway. That part is going to be a simple brown. Originally, the doors were painted green, so we'll start there. However, over the years they darkened to almost black, so we'll accomplish that with a dark wash. Follow it up with a brown dry brush to simulate where the paint has worn away to expose the wood below. The doors fit nicely into the holes I left for them. Okay, it's a bit of a tight fit, but it went in eventually. The central door glues into place. Now for that window. It won't be an actual window, you can't see inside, but to simulate glass, I have a clever idea. I'm going to take a piece of clear plastic and paint one side black. This black will be on the back side of the plastic once it is installed. I'm also painting a piece of aluminum wire that will be used for the grill work. The plastic gets glued into place. You can see how, with the black backing, the surface has become reflective. Now to glue down the wires. And they get a nice trim. Now the window gets glued into place. That looks pretty nice. The glue left some residue on the plastic, but it just looks like natural grime buildup. And let's take a second to admire how it looks from street level. Now to work on the apse dome. It has a series of ridges, which I will simulate with aluminum wire. Conveniently, my cutting mat has an angle guide with 15-degree intervals, just what I need. The wires also form a cage to cover one of the oval window openings. I'm going to trim each wire to size. Now it's time to paint the walls. There's a lot of paint to apply and I didn't want to have to mix a new batch of paint halfway through the process, so I'm going to mix up a whole bunch of it at the start. That way everything will be a uniform color. And to avoid streaks, I'm applying the paint with a sponge brush. This was okay for general coverage, but to get into the corners I found I needed to use an ordinary brush anyway, so in the end I don't know if it made a difference. Once the whole thing was painted, I wasn't happy with the color. The actual walls are a bit darker and a different shade than I initially thought. So once again, I'll apply a wash to fix the color. In the end, it's still not perfect, but it's much better. The side window frames and some of the trim get painted to resemble limestone. And the columns on the side will get the full travertine treatment. The stonework on this bit of trim resembles concrete, so it gets a special paint job. I'm stippling the brush to give it a stony texture. A bit of road on the side of the building also gets painted. And don't forget the tile. Good thing I saved the paint mix I used before. This side window is surrounded by exposed brickwork. I'm not going to make it look like brick, but at least I can give it a brick color. Now for the window panes. I'm using the same technique that I used on the facade, but this time I've printed templates to help cut out the windows. This side door and the window above it just pop into place. For the grill work on these, I created a jig to help hold the aluminum wire for gluing. And here it is installed and painted. There are a series of drain spouts along the exterior of the church. I'm using 2mm thick aluminum armature wire for that. Each piece gets straightened out and one end bent at 90 degrees. And I've prepared a whole bunch of them. They each get a metallic gray paint job. Yeah, I know I should have started with primer. It's too late now. They get glued into place. And I'll drip some dark wash down them for centuries of rain and leakage. For the tall windows on the sides, I found a fine adhesive mesh to simulate the fine grill work. I'll apply it on each one and trim it. It looks great once placed on the model. Now for the domes over the side altars. They're covered with oxidized copper, so the paint job is quite complex. I'll start with a black paint in the window slots, and no, I'm not going to give it the plastic treatment here. And the dome gets a base coat of medium gray. The framing around the windows gets painted white. I'll stipple on some light gray over the medium, leaving a few small gaps where the darker color can show through. The next layer is zinc green, stippled unevenly over the dome. On top of that goes a bit of pale blue. A white wash will lighten the colors to better resemble old copper. And a dark wash over the whole structure will grime it up to match the rest of the church. Now that they are painted, I can finally glue them in place permanently. Last but not least, the roof. I've already described all the painting techniques here, so I won't bore you with the details. Looks like I totally underestimated the amount of work that we need to go into this project, so I'm going to stop here, and there will be a part 5. In that part, we're going to work on the details, finish off a little detail work. We're going to focus on the observatory itself, and hopefully by the end, we'll be ready to put this thing on display. I hope you enjoyed this project. If so, please like and subscribe and click that bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. Now, this video is not sponsored by the Vatican Observatory, but for full disclosure, I should mention that I do make use of their facilities and resources. However, the materials and tools come out of my own personal budget. The purpose of the Vatican Observatory is to be a sign to the world of the compatibility of faith and science, and it could use your support. If you'd like to support the work at the Vatican Observatory, or even just learn a little bit more about it, there's a link in the description below. Thank you.